Hello everyone, welcome to Amnesia the Dark Descent. It's a story in which the player sees through the eyes of Daniel and follows him on his quest to journey to the heart of Castle Brennenburg to slay its master. Today we will be deconstructing this wonderfully terrifying piece of media, brought to us by the devs of Frictional Games in 2014. We will be going into all the delightful details that make it the influential titan it was and still is, even to this day. Let's dive in, shall we? Amnesia the Dark Descent is, obviously, a video game. What separates this medium from, say, a movie or a novel are the mechanics which elevate the audience experience to an in-depth, interactive adventure that brings the game's more horrific elements to the forefront. One excellent example of this elevation is in the mechanic of sanity and how it turns the monsters from creepy-looking obstacles to unspeakable horrors. Early on in the game, the player learns that witnessing scary events will eat away at their sanity. These scary events include various occurrences, but most notably include looking at the monsters for too long. As the player looks at one of the monsters, whether it is attacking or not, their vision will blur, their ears will ring, they may even begin to hallucinate as their sanity drops to zero. Because of seeing the protagonist Daniel's reaction, the player is made to feel the same fear he does. This sanity mechanic turns what is just a scary character model, with all the limitations that entails, into an unspeakable monster, one whose very presence brings madness wherever it goes. Another example of interactive mechanics elevating the experience of the player is in the dynamic between light and sanity. When the sanity mechanic is introduced, the player also learns that lingering in the dark for too long eats away at their sanity. As a result, the player will tend to stick to well-lit places whenever possible, using their lantern when moving through the game's many dark corridors. This gears the player towards a mindset of resource management, and they initially concern themselves mainly with preserving their tinderboxes and ever-precious oil. However, when the monster is introduced, the player discovers that darkness is the only place to effectively hide. This raising of the stakes leads to an incredibly stressful atmosphere, where you as a player are paradoxically made to fear the darkness for the loss of sanity it causes, yet also to fear the light, since that is where the monster can see you. There are some common pitfalls in video games that I believe Amnesia did an admirable job of avoiding. For one, I applaud the restraint of the devs to not include a health and sanity bar. While such a HUD would be welcome in, say, an RPG, it would have only disrupted the immersion in the Dark Descent. Another pitfall the game avoided was in treading the fine line between holding the audience's hand and leading them lost. Too much hand-holding, and the immersion is shattered. Not enough, and the player is left hopelessly lost. Amnesia managed to tread this line without falling too far towards one direction. Admittedly, I did get lost a few times during my playthrough, most notably during the box stacking incident. Please stop jumping over it. I really hope this is what I'm supposed to be doing. Still, I think it was the right choice for the devs to lean to the side of letting the player get a little lost and having to figure things out for themselves, rather than risk breaking the wonderful immersion of this game. Speaking of immersion, another factor that made the game incredibly immersive was the sound design. One of the greatest tools at a game developer's disposal is the sound design. And let me tell you, these devs took this tool and pushed it to the absolute limit. It is the sound design, in my opinion, that truly makes this game scary. Throughout the game, the castle creaks, the winds blow, the stones crumble and shift, and everything makes Daniel start to hyperventilate, making you think that you're about to die, regardless of whether there's a threat or not.
Okay. Ah. So it's not just the castle.
You'd think such an atmosphere would quickly numb the player to the scares, but this too was accounted for. There are entire sections where there are almost no unnerving sounds, usually during the puzzles, which lulls the player into a false sense of security before ripping it all away. It also helps that the sound of the monster chasing you is one of the most upsetting screeches I've ever had the misfortune of hearing.
Oh, we are running. We are running. We are running. We are running.
Throughout my playthrough, I found the game still had ways to scare me, even up to the final act. The sound design also lends to the player's immersion in the story through the way it builds the characters, through voice acting. In every section of the game, Daniel's hazy memories can be heard, resurfacing even through a self-induced amnesia of the Damascus Rose, which we'll talk about later. The excellent voice acting gives life to the characters. My personal favorite was Sam Mowry, who played the role of the immortal Baron Alexander beautifully. He gave an air of menace to an already terrifying character.
These cells are meant to hold prisoners who are under treatment. The people you send for will end up here. Remember that the confinement itself works as a preamble to the torture, and you should pace yourself. Don't take anyone before they are ready.
However, all the voice actors did an excellent job, and they deserve all the props. Speaking of the compelling characters, that leads us to the writing. One of my favorite features of Amnesia was the writing. The sound design and the encounters with the monsters were scary, yes, but scares without reason often feel hollow. To this end, the game supplies an incredibly compelling narrative that the player uncovers as they progress. The foundation of this narrative is in following Daniel, the avatar of the player. He is introduced as an amnesiac, whose purpose is solely to journey to the heart of Castle Brandenburg and slay its master, Alexander. Due to Daniel's amnesia, the player learns of who he is and why he must kill Alexander alongside Daniel himself. This lends to a natural progression of the overarching story, where the trickle of information from flashbacks and notes strewn about the castle is a feature of Daniel's character, rather than a forced plot device. Daniel's character arc itself is also compelling. It's a tale of corruption of one's soul for the sake of self-preservation. As the character journeys through Castle Brandenburg, they learn that all of Daniel's troubles begin when he discovers a mysterious orb during an expedition to Algeria. Soon, people around him begin to meet terrible fates, dying under mysterious circumstances. Daniel soon comes to the conclusion that he is being pursued by an entity that brings death wherever it goes, a shadow, a guardian of the orb, awoken by its absence. In desperation, Daniel accepts an unusual offer of protection from none other than Alexander. When Daniel arrives at Castle Brandenburg, he is a tired, haggard man, racked with guilt over the deaths of his colleagues, haunted by the ever-advancing shadow. It is this vulnerable state, combined with Alexander's expertise in seemingly every field, that leads to Daniel's unwavering trust in the Baron. Daniel follows Alexander's instructions. He goes along with the banishment ritual, despite it being nothing more than a front for Alexander to harness the power of the orb. When the ritual fails, Daniel follows Alexander's instructions in how to torture prisoners in the dungeon to extract vitae, a mystical substance derived from the blood of suffering humans. He believes the lies Alexander tells him, that these prisoners are criminals, that they deserve these horrific punishments inflicted upon them. Daniel, because of the state he arrives in, because of how his fear of being killed by the shadow blinds him, he does not recognize just how much of himself he has lost. The event that finally pushes Daniel over the edge, the thing that forces him to see what he has become, is when he and Alexander capture the Zimmerman family after running out of prisoners from which to harvest vitae. However, one of the daughters of the farmer manages to escape her cell. Daniel chases her down, eventually killing her with his bare hands. This is what breaks through all the lies Daniel had told himself. He could find no way to justify the action of killing an innocent child. Naturally, Daniel desires revenge. Revenge on Alexander. Revenge for what Alexander has made him. But his mind has been so weakened by the terror of the shadow and the horror of his own actions that he cannot bring himself to move from the spot where he killed the girl. To this end, Daniel drinks the Damascus Rose, which is essentially an amnesia potion, one that he and Alexander used on the prisoners to make it so they can never grow used to the torture. It is in this freshly amnesiac state that the player sees him when they begin the game. This extensive backstory for Daniel gives depth to the protagonist. It gives meaning to his actions. It makes the player want to assist him in his quest to slay Alexander, despite Daniel's flaws and Daniel's own responsibility in the horror. Similarly, Alexander's backstory makes him a far more compelling antagonist. At the beginning of the game, Alexander is built up as little more than an adversarial figure, a brilliant immortal, the enigmatic builder of Castle Brennenburg. However, as the player progresses further into the castle, closer to Alexander's inner sanctum, there are notes that hint at his true motivations for coveting the power of the orb. It is revealed, near the end, that Alexander is originally from another dimension, marooned in our own world. He has been desperately scraping together what limited resources he can find here to return home, to open a gate back to his love. While having this motivation by no means makes Alexander sympathetic, even he is aware of how monstrous and reprehensible his actions are. It elevates him from a mere prop for Daniel to fight against, to a terrifying foe who would do anything in the name of love. Really, everything in this game is just incredible. The mechanics, the sound design, the voice acting, even the graphics hold up surprisingly well for a game made 10 years ago. And the thread that ties all of these elements together is the story that gives all else meaning, tying everything into the whole that is Amnesia the Dark Descent. I mentioned beforehand how influential this game was, and still is. This was due in part to the way it championed a new brand of horror game, one that focused on creating an atmosphere of helpless dread, without punctuating that dread with combat. Unlike games of the time, such as Resident Evil and Dead Space, Amnesia took all weapons out of the hands of the player, leaving running and hiding as the only means to defend themselves. Granted, Amnesia was not the first game to have done this, but the superior execution, combined with a little luck, made it a standout, a landmark of this new brand of fear in games. Many other games have tried to emulate this, to varying degrees of success. Titles such as Outlast and Slender come to mind. Another way Amnesia the Dark Descent has influenced gaming is in the programmers it has inspired. The game set itself apart from others by being built on its own engine, one that they made accessible to fans following the game's release. They even made a detailed guide showing fans how to use the engine, leading to a thriving modding community. Some of these mods became practically as well loved as the base game. It is not too large a leap to think that many developers today got their start modding for Amnesia. The final obvious way the game has influenced the world is in the way it has catapulted forwards the careers of many YouTubers who featured the game on their channel. Most notably was PewDiePie, who was brought out of obscurity by his Amnesia playthrough and subsequent playthroughs of popular Amnesia mods. Now, my feelings about the man himself are conflicted. On the one hand, he is a model for what success on YouTube looks like. He's one of the first of a generation of influencers, a pioneer who helped bring us to where we are today. On the other hand, well...
Leave me alone!
Regardless, the game was, for better or for worse, the catalyst for his success. Amnesia the Dark Descent has, without a doubt, shaped much of our media. From horror games to the online landscape, the game's influence can clearly be seen by all. Now, I could go further in depth with this game. I could do a second playthrough, get all the achievements, learn the lore like the back of my hand, but that would defeat the purpose of this video. I just want to share with all of you why this game is so goddamn influential, and why it still holds up today. At its core, Amnesia the Dark Descent is simply a cohesive, creative vision, realized by an array of extremely talented people. That kind of media, game or otherwise, will always have staying power. It will always inspire more creative people and encourage them to bring their own visions to life. The game is still available on Steam. I encourage you all to give it a shot. There will be a link in the description.
Hi again. Welcome to the end of the video. Thank you so much for making it all the way here. As you can tell, this video in particular took a lot more time and effort than a lot of my other content. So definitely let me know if you want to see more stuff like this. Drop a like, leave a comment, subscribe. Those will all let me know you want to see more content like this. Other than that, my full playthrough of Amnesia the Dark Descent can be seen right here. And if you want to see something that the almighty algorithm suggests to you, check out whatever pops up here. Other than that, I will see you in the next video. Bye!